Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Now, there are many things you said in your oral report about what's going on in the last week, and particularly of note was your support for the organisation called Black Lives Matter. Now, I'm sure we agree with that as a phrase, and of course, most people would agree that all lives matter, whether they're black, white, brown, or any other colour. But Black Lives Matter is an anarchist and a Marxist organisation that wants to defund the police. Now, as you're in charge of the police in London, why are you supporting an organisation that wants to defund the police?
I think you're conflating organisations with movements and the cause. And I support fully the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't support individual organisations that you refer to. I'm quite clear. The police need more funds, not less. So I'm not in favour of defunding the police. I spent the last 4 years campaigning to get a decent fund from the government to reverse their cuts. The evidence from the last 10 years is the only people defunding the police are the Conservative government.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you don't want to defund the police, but, whether it's a movement or an organisation, the aims of this movement are to defund the police, and they have another set of aims as well that are very, very much on the far left Marxist side of politics. I mean, another one of their aims is they want to disrupt the natural nuclear family, which would cause chaos in society. I mean, that is part of the movement. Do you support that aim as well, Mr. Mayor?
Chair, the question is, do I want to, inverted commas, disrupt the nuclear family? And the answer is probably no, isn't it?
Well, that's good. It's good to know that you actually, when you think about it, you don't actually agree with the aims of this movement, Black Lives Matter. And maybe, it's good to red pill you a little bit, Mr. Mayor. Another one of their aims is to smash capitalism. Do you think that's a good aim of Black Lives Matter as well?
I think the premise of these questions are based upon misunderstandings about what Black Lives Matter movement is about. And what I'd say respectfully to the movement was just to look into what Black Lives Matter movement is about and the history of the Black Lives Matter movement, which began before George Floyd's brutal killing that was videoed and seen across the world. It's the racism, the discrimination and the inequality that black people face, not just in Minnesota, Minneapolis and the USA, but around the world as well, but also the fact that our city has benefited hugely from slavery and the legacy of slavery. Indeed, both you and I were paying in our taxes reparations to slave owners who freed slaves 200 years ago. And what Black Lives Matter, the movement, is about is recognising that still in 2020 there is racism, inequality and discrimination. And I know that others who are clearly trying to find ulterior motives for Black Lives Matter to denigrate the organisation should reflect why it is they feel so strongly of being resistance to fighting racism, inequality and discrimination.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I have looked at Black Lives Matter. I have looked into it, which is why I'm asking you these questions. And you can look on the website of Black Lives Matter, and their aims are just there, and they're stated. It doesn't seem that you actually knew that that's what their real aims are. Now, of course, we all are horrified at slavery that took place 200 to 500 years ago in this country, but slavery still goes on. And there are 27 million slaves around the world. I know you like to make comments about what's going on around the world, but one of the countries where there is still slavery going on is Libya. And there are black slaves there. And many of the Arab people living in Libya actually put black people into slavery. Do you have anything to say about that? Because that is where we should be focused today, on stopping modern slavery rather than worrying about statues and things that happened 200 years ago.
Well, as a mayor, I've committed more to the issue of addressing the issue of modern slavery than any mayor in the history of our city. But I tell you this, our ability to fight slavery in Libya or elsewhere is made much harder by the government abolishing the Department for International Trade, one of the greatest legacies of the Labour government, established in 1997. And if you feel so strongly about slavery in Libya, you should be campaigning with Labour against the government's plans to merge DFID into the FCO, so it's subsumed, and the work they do is diluted.
Well, that's a completely other point, but I mean, that actually, that is what has actually happened there is a good thing, because the Department for International Development really just wastes a lot of British taxpayers' money on often green projects and so on, sticking up wind farms in areas where they don't provide much electricity. But that's a whole other matter. But in this country, there is one issue of slavery that I do need to point out, and that is the case of raping and grooming gangs which have gone on in this country in Rotherham, Rochdale, Derby, Oxford, Bristol, and in London as well. And this is done, as we know, by the Quilliam Foundation report, by majority ethnic Pakistani heritage people. And they put people into slavery in this country, sex slavery. Do you think that is an area that we need to focus on when we are dealing with modern slavery?
I think some of the prosecutions brought by the chief prosecutor, as it was then, Nazir Afzal, who, according to my basic knowledge about Islam and Pakistan, I think is of Pakistani origin and Islamic faith, good example of a chief prosecutor using his values to good stead in relation to bringing prosecutions against the groomers and stuff. And I'm really proud of any prosecutions being brought where people who are guilty of these heinous crimes are brought to book. I think it's really important for the full force of the laws to be brought against anybody committing these sorts of heinous criminal offences, as indeed all serious criminal offences, particularly against women and girls.
Mm. These have obviously been found in many, many other cities and towns around the country, but there hasn't been much of many prosecutions happened in London. But, obviously, as the police commissioner for Northumberland said, this is happening anywhere, and the only reason why it's not being found is that people aren't looking. Are you looking in London for grooming gangs in London in order to prosecute people? Because if it's going on in cities like Oxford and Bristol and Peterborough and Aylesbury, smaller places, it's surely going on in London as well on a large scale.
Can I just be clear, Chair? Is the inference that because of my faith or my ethnic origin, I'm not seeking to follow these crimes?
No, I'm asking you because you're the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Assembly Member Kurten, I think you're pretty much drifting now onto drifting off the subject itself. So can I just ask you to stick to the topic and ask a relevant question, please?
Well, Chair, I mean, I was originally asking about Black Lives Matter, and then the Mayor started talking about slavery, and the questioning has developed.
Yeah, but you're still going off the tangent now, so can you please be cautious about that and not ask...
Okay, well, Chair, if you want to disallow my question, that's your prerogative.
Well, I will use that then. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on now to the questions to the Mayor on the priority order. The first question is number 1754